Mrs. Eleanor Hayes sat at her kitchen table at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night, her reading glasses sliding down her nose as she graded another stack of 7th grade math assignments. The coffee had gone cold hours ago. Her eyes burned from exhaustion. But then she turned to Marcus Thompson's homework, and tucked between the problems about fractions and percentages, she found a small piece of lined paper with handwriting so shaky it looked like it had been written during an earthquake. The note contained just 7 words that would shatter her heart and change everything. "I haven't eaten in 3 days. Help." Eleanor's hand trembled as she held that note under the lamplight, reading it again and again, hoping somehow she had misunderstood. But there was no misunderstanding. The desperation in those wobbly letters. No mistaking the way the pencil had pressed, so hard into the paper that it had almost torn through. Marcus Thompson, the quiet boy in the 3rd row who always wore the same oversized hoodie, who never raised his hand, who turned in homework that was sometimes brilliant and sometimes blank. She had noticed him, of course, but like so many teachers drowning in overcrowded classrooms and endless paperwork, she had not truly seen him. Until now. If you believe in the power of kindness and second chances, if you believe that one person can make a difference in someone's darkest hour, please hit that like button, leave a comment about a teacher who changed your life, share this story with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to this channel. Because what happens next proves that sometimes the smallest acts of noticing can save a life. That night, Eleanor could not sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about Marcus. She remembered how he would sometimes fall asleep during class, his head resting on his folded arms. She had assumed he was just another teenager staying up too late on his phone. She thought about how thin he had looked. Lately, how the hoodie seemed to swallow him whole. How he would linger near the cafeteria doors during lunch but never go inside. All the signs had been there, painted in invisible ink that only heartbreak could reveal. The next morning, Eleanor arrived at school an hour early. She did not go to the principal first or call social services, though she knew she would have to do both eventually. Instead, she went to the cafeteria and bought 2 breakfast sandwiches, a carton of orange juice, and a banana. She put them in a paper bag and waited in her classroom, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest. When Marcus shuffled in just before the bell rang, hood pulled up, eyes down, she called him over to her desk. He approached slowly, suspiciously, like a stray dog that had been kicked too many times to trust a kind hand. Eleanor handed him the bag without ceremony, without pity in her eyes, just quiet understanding. She told him she had bought too much breakfast and wondered if he could help her out. For a moment, Marcus just stared at the bag. Then his face crumpled, and he tried to hide it, turning away slightly. But Eleanor saw the tears that he quickly wiped with his sleeve. He took the bag with shaking hands and whispered, "Thank you," so quietly she almost did not hear it. She wanted to hug him, to promise him everything would be okay, but she knew better than to overwhelm him with too much too soon. So she just nodded and told him to eat before class started, that she needed to step out for a minute to give him privacy. In the hallway, Eleanor allowed herself to cry. Then she dried her eyes, straightened her shoulders, and went to work. She spoke with the school counselor, who immediately opened a case file. She called social services, who promised to investigate the home situation. She learned that Marcus lived with his grandmother, who was sick and barely surviving on a fixed income. His mother was absent, his father unknown. The grandmother did her best, but medications were expensive, and rent consumed everything else. Sometimes there was simply no money left for food. Over the following weeks, Eleanor became more than Marcus's teacher. She became his lifeline. She started a quiet campaign, never making Marcus feel like a charity case. She would pack extra lunch and pretend she was not hungry. She would bring in granola bars and leave them in a drawer, telling the class they could take one whenever they needed energy. She bought notebooks and pencils and slipped them onto Marcus's desk when he was not looking. She stayed after school to help him with homework. But really, she stayed to make sure he had a safe place to be, to talk if he wanted, to just exist without judgment. But Eleanor knew that her small acts of kindness, while meaningful, were not enough. Marcus needed sustainable help. She reached out to a local food bank and arranged for his grandmother to receive regular deliveries. She connected them with a social worker who helped the grandmother apply for additional assistance programs she had not known existed. She rallied other teachers, and together they created a discreet fund to help students in crisis. What started with one note and one homework assignment became a movement of awareness in that school. Marcus began to change, not overnight, because healing never happens overnight, but gradually, like a plant remembering how to grow toward the light. He started raising his hand in class. His homework became consistently excellent. The hoodie came down, and underneath it, Eleanor saw a brilliant, thoughtful, kind young man who had been hiding in plain sight. He smiled sometimes, a real smile that reached his eyes. He made friends. He joined the math club. He started to believe that maybe, just maybe, he mattered. Months later, Marcus wrote Eleanor another note. This time he handed it to her directly, looking her in the eyes. The note was longer, written in steady handwriting on clean paper. It said that she had saved his life, that he had been planning to give up the day before he wrote that first note, that he had thought no one would notice or care if he disappeared. But she had noticed. She had cared. And that had made all the difference. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that we all have the power to change someone's life simply by paying attention, by choosing kindness, by refusing to look away from pain, please hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs hope today. Comment below and tell us about a time when someone noticed you when you needed it most. Your engagement helps this message reach more people who need to hear it. And here is something special. Comment "I see you" if you commit to being someone who notices, who cares, who acts when you see someone struggling. Eleanor Hayes kept teaching for many more years, but she never graded homework the same way again. She looked beyond the math problems and grammar mistakes. She looked for the invisible notes, the silent cries for help hidden in margins and mistakes and missing assignments. And sometimes, in the quiet moments late at night when she sat at her kitchen table with another stack of papers, she would remember that one note, those 7 desperate words, and she would whisper a prayer of gratitude that she had been paying attention that particular Tuesday night. Because sometimes the smallest note contains the loudest scream. Sometimes homework is more than homework. And sometimes a teacher's job is not just to educate minds, but to save lives, one student at a time. Marcus graduated with honors, went to college on scholarship, and became a social worker himself. And every year on the anniversary of that note, he sent Eleanor a text message with just 2 words. Thank you. Those 2 words, she always said, meant more than any paycheck or award ever could.